Assalamu alaikum. I'm going to be doing part 2 to the cultural series, talking about culture and some of the points that I disagree with when it comes to culture. So I am not a scholar by any means, so if I offend anybody, it's really important to use scholars to kind of navigate certain issues that I talk about today. So yeah, let's get on to the video. So basically, I wanted to talk about kind of culture in the context of the Quraysh when the Prophet ﷺ and when the Quran came. So basically, they have a culture. Obviously, when the Quran was revealed, there was a particular way of life, a culture, and so what Islam did was either eradicate some of the cultural practices that were harmful to society, and then obviously some were left. Some of the cultural practices that were left would be the clothing would have to be tweaked, but some essence of the clothing would still be there. The way that they ate, obviously some was left, but things that weren't left were like burying your children alive, your daughters alive. Some other cultural practices that were harmful to the society were shut down, obviously were closed, and Islam had come from its roots and built society, built a justice system, and things like that. So when you take a look at culture, you're not eradicating all of culture. You're leaving what is toxic. You're basically abandoning what is harmful to society. You are obviously abandoning things that go against La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. You're going against things that no longer comply with all of what Islam does, right? So we're really careful when people try to like tie in culture with the religion and like weave it in, because it's totally not like that. So I wanted to talk about also some points when it comes to culture. Another point when we talk about the start of culture and all that, we have to look at culture as being regional. So for example, like let's take Pakistan. When you're looking at like the temperature, it's just regional. So the way that people wear shamar kameez, like Afghans, India, Bangladesh, we wear like the shamar kameez, which is like that, like a long top and like those pants. I don't know how to describe it, but it's cotton. Basically, that is used because of where they live. Okay, so basically, it's thinner material. The way that it's constructed, it's good for that type of weather. Also, the fabric that they have access to, so it's easily made, and it's for that particular weather. So we have to look at culture being in a context, in a way of life that's permissible. And when you're tying, like let's say clothing, we don't tie it to piety. It's really, really a cautious thing that we have to realize that clothing does not equal piety. Just because those come from a very pious place, like near the like Mecca, Medina, that doesn't mean that if we wear it in the West that we're more pious than somebody else, right? The overarching thing that controls piety would be modesty, right? We're looking at modesty as a whole. We're not looking at pieces of clothing to dictate whether somebody is more pious, right? If we look at the overarching thing is modesty. If we're covering our satar properly, like we're looking at as an illogical stance. We're not looking at as a very narrow-minded stance. So that's what we have to do when we're trying to eradicate what's culture versus Islam, is we have to look at more overarching concepts, like modesty and not particular clothing, and stuff like that. And the second part is using our logic that Allah gave us is very important to differentiate. So it's obviously we're using Islamic rules and rulings to dictate what's haram and halal, like what's culture and what's not, but we're also using our logic, right? Like our parents did not know any better. Like we in this generation have the internet, we have more access to different scholars, there's more books now to combat culture so easily. And if we're not doing that, if we're just saying yes to our parents, then our ummah is gonna get destroyed. Our ummah is already weak, but even if we're fully covered and things like that, and like mendi. Like a mendi, you can even be fully covered. You can have just like a scholar has to dive into this, but you can even have just women at your party, like just females, but you have like many does not come from Islam. Like it's just nakah and walima. You have to talk to a scholar in how to navigate if there's a mendi. But if you're just following because it's culture, that's not good evidence to bring to Allah. So you have to, there's this, now we have scholars, we could back it up with scholars, and that is for our scholars, not for culture to decide that, right? So another example that's very controversial would be the fact of living with your in-laws. And people may think that I am a bit feminist when it comes into the regard of living with in-laws, but this is a scholar this is an issue that revolves this is an issue that is me like this is an issue like living with in-laws that a scholar and could really help with, because for example, like people, this is a tradition in South Asian culture that you just live with your in-laws. As a female, you live with your in-laws. It is like second nature. It's very like the right thing to do. It's the next step. It's not like really much thought into it. It's something that you're just gonna do. And obviously in places like Pakistan, houses are not really being developed like you can't live close to your in-laws. You have to live with them, with them, because of certain ways that the structure of like the housing is, money, finances. Like I understand that it is in a particular context, and that's why a scholar is really helpful in the West to navigate the issue, because a lot of the time you can live close to your in-laws, you can still provide financially to them. It really could also be like if they're physically able to move around the house. A lot of things come into context, how the wife feels, how the context of the wife situation, like so many things. There's like a list of things that you consider to make a decision. But if you're just making a decision because, oh well, that's what my mom said, or this is because this is how it works, basically understanding that justification needs to happen, and there literally needs to be evidence to suggest like this is the right way to do things. You cannot say that living with in-laws creates more piety for the daughter-in-law, and it's such a it's a pious decision. It's so pious for you to do that. Like you can't say that because it doesn't come from the Quran. Like it's not explicitly stated in the Quran. Respecting your parents is, but again, that's an overarching concept, and it's not specific case that you must live with in-laws, right? So I hope that makes sense. I'm not a scholar, and that's why it's kind of I feel a little bit like guilty for talking about a scholar. Like it's an issue that a student of knowledge should really talk about, but I just wanted to talk about how piety, people think things are more pious and it gets mixed with culture and all of that. Like narrow-minded is a source of like how culture can be bad, is if we're so narrow-minded, it comes in all avenues and it can harm the next generation. And yeah, so that's it. I just wanted to go on a rant and talk about some of the things, and yeah.